Spanish is now the most common language spoken in the pubs of Dublin, once the capital of a rebellious English territory. The Grand Plaza Mayor de Londres stands where Trafalgar Square was once envisioned. Its centerpiece, a towering statue of King Philip II and the Pope. He directly influences who sits on half the thrones of Europe, thanks to one fateful naval battle in 1588. Number 8. The Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. Imagine a vast kingdom, stretching from the Baltic Sea almost to the Black Sea. That's the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth in this new reality. With England gone as a Protestant counterweight, and the Holy Roman Empire more focused on internal Catholic consolidation and its Spanish alliance, the Commonwealth finds itself in a curious position. It's big, really big. Think of it as the giant on Europe's eastern edge, a land of sprawling farms and a famously independent nobility, the Szlachta. These nobles, fiercely guarding their golden liberty, elect their king, a system almost unheard of in an increasingly absolutist Europe. This means the King of Poland and Grand Duke of Lithuania has to negotiate, persuade, and sometimes beg to get things done, especially when it comes to raising taxes or armies. Commonwealth's military power is unique. Heavy cavalry, the legendary Winged Hussars, are still a force to be reckoned with on the battlefield, their elaborate feathered wings striking fear into enemies. They are the pride of the nation. However, the vast, often sparsely populated eastern borderlands, known as the Wild Fields, are a constant source of tension. Cossacks, Tatars, and the growing power of the Tsardom of Russia mean that the Commonwealth's armies are frequently engaged in defending these frontiers. This constant, low-level warfare shapes its military doctrine and drains its resources. Culturally, the Commonwealth is a fascinating mix. While the Spanish victory has emboldened Catholicism across Europe, Poland, Lithuania has a long tradition of religious tolerance, at least compared to many other places. While Catholicism is dominant, there are still significant populations of Eastern Orthodox Christians, Protestants, Jews, and even Muslims. This diversity makes it cities like Krakow, Warsaw, Varsovia in Spanish-influenced maps, and Vilnius vibrant melting pots, though religious tensions are never too far from the surface, especially with pressure from Rome and Madrid for greater Catholic uniformity. The Renaissance and Baroque styles find unique expression here, often blended with local traditions. Latin remains a key language of scholarship and diplomacy, alongside Polish. Economically, the Commonwealth is Europe's breadbasket. Its fertile lands produce enormous quantities of grain, which are shipped down rivers like the Vistula to Baltic ports such as Gdansk, Danzig, and from there to feed the cities of Western Europe, including those within the Spanish sphere. This grain trade makes some nobles incredibly wealthy, but it also creates a society heavily reliant on agriculture and serf labor. The lack of a strong centralized monarchy and the power of the nobility mean that industrial development, as it might begin to sprout elsewhere, is slow to take root here. The focus remains on land and the wealth derived from it. Its sheer size and resources make it powerful, but its internal political structure, with the infamous liberum veto, where any single noble can block legislation, often leads to political paralysis, a vulnerability its neighbors watch with keen interest. It's a gentle giant, powerful in its own way, but always teetering on the edge of internal squabbles that could undo its strength. Number 7. The Tsardom of Russia. Far to the east, beyond the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, lies the vast and expanding Tsardom of Russia. With the Spanish Armada's success reshaping Western and Central Europe, Russia's gaze already eastward intensifies. The Tsars in Moscow rule with an iron fist, their power considered divinely ordained, a stark contrast to the elected monarchy of their Polish-Lithuanian neighbors. This autocratic system allows for decisive, if often brutal, action. Imagine a land of immense forests, biting winters, and a deeply devout Orthodox Christian population. The church and the state are intertwined with the Tsar, seen as the protector of the true faith, especially as Catholicism, backed by Spanish might, asserts itself so strongly in the West. Russia's power comes from its sheer size, its growing population, and its relentless territorial expansion. While European powers squabble over colonies across the oceans, Russia is conquering a continent overland. Cossack explorers and fur traders push ever eastward into Siberia, claiming vast territories rich in furs, soft gold, and other resources. This eastward drive brings them into contact, and often conflict with indigenous Siberian peoples, and occasionally brushes against the sphere of influence of empires, like Ming or Dengzhi, China. The wealth from Siberian furs helps fill the Tsar's coffers, funding his armies and his ambitions. Militarily, Russia relies on large armies composed mainly of conscripted peasants and a growing class of service nobility, the durianstvo, who are granted land in exchange for lifelong service to the Tsar. While perhaps not as technologically advanced as the armies of Spain or the Holy Roman Empire in some respects, Russian forces are known for their resilience, their ability to endure harsh conditions, and their sheer numbers. Fortified towns and monasteries serve as strong points along its ever-expanding frontiers. The lack of a warm water port with easy access to the major sea lanes is a persistent strategic challenge, something the Tsars are acutely aware of. The Baltic is dominated by others, and the Black Sea is an Ottoman lake. This geographical constraint shapes much of its foreign policy. Culturally, Russia develops on a path somewhat distinct from Western Europe. The Orthodox faith is central, influencing art, architecture, and daily life. The elaborate onion domes of its churches are a defining feature of its cities. While there is contact with the West, particularly through trade and the hiring of foreign specialists, the overwhelming Spanish Catholic dominance in Europe means that Western cultural influences arrive filtered or are sometimes viewed with suspicion. The focus is often on strengthening its own unique traditions and asserting its role as a major Orthodox power. Conquest of England by Spain means there's no English influence to speak of, and the intellectual currents of a suppressed Protestant world don't reach Russia in the same way they might have. Instead, it's the shadow of Spanish power and the resurgence of a militant Catholicism that frames Russia's perception of the West, often reinforcing its sense of being a unique civilization, a third Rome. This colossal, somewhat enigmatic empire continues its steady, often ruthless march, a sleeping giant whose stirrings are increasingly felt by its neighbors. Number 6. The Kingdom of Portugal. Portugal. Once a pioneering force in global exploration, its fate took a sharp turn even before the Armada. By 1588, it was already in a personal union with Spain, meaning King Philip II of Spain was also King Philip I of Portugal. The Armada's victory and the subsequent cementing of Spanish global dominance profoundly changes Portugal's trajectory. Instead of this union being a temporary dynastic arrangement, it becomes a permanent fixture, evolving into an integral, if still somewhat distinct, part of the greater Spanish imperial system. Think of it not as a conquered territory, but as a deeply integrated junior partner in a global Iberian enterprise, with Madrid holding all the trump cards. Portugal's power is now largely derived from its past glories and its remaining colonial assets, which are now managed for the overall benefit of the Spanish crown. The vast Portuguese holdings in Brazil, with its sugar plantations and emerging gold mines, become even more crucial to the imperial economy. African coastal forts and trading posts in Angola and Mozambique continue to supply enslaved people for the plantations of the Americas, including those in formerly English North American territories now under Spanish control. Its outposts in India, like Goa, and in Macau in China, are vital links in the Spanish global trade network, channeling spices, silks, and other exotic goods back to Europe via routes now firmly under Iberian control. Portuguese language, while still spoken, sees increasing pressure from Spanish, especially in official and commercial circles. The Portuguese Navy, once a rival to Spain's, is now fully incorporated into the Spanish imperial fleet. Portuguese sailors and navigators, with their centuries of experience, are valuable assets, but they sail under Spanish command and for Spanish objectives. There's no longer a separate Portuguese foreign policy or grand strategy. Decisions are made in Madrid at the Escorial Palace, and Lisbon, Lisboa, becomes a major regional administrative center and port, but not the capital of an independent empire it once was. The glory days of Henry the Navigator and Vasco da Gama are remembered, but they are increasingly cast as foundational steps towards the current Iberian Imperium. Culturally, Portugal is heavily influenced by the resurgent militant Catholicism championed by Spain. The Inquisition, already present, intensifies its activities, ensuring religious orthodoxy. Portuguese art and architecture of this period reflect the dominant Spanish Baroque style. Though often with local nuances, there's a sense of pride in the shared Catholic faith and the global reach of Iberian power, but also a subtle undercurrent of lost autonomy, a saudade not just for distant lands but perhaps for a lost independent destiny. Portuguese nobility is largely co-opted into the Spanish system, offered positions and honors within the larger imperial structure. While some may grumble in private, open dissent is unthinkable given the overwhelming power of Madrid. Portugal contributes its wealth, its expertise, and its people to the Spanish-led world order, a significant cog in a mighty machine, but a cog nonetheless. Its former empire is now a vital component of an even larger, Spanish-dominated one. Number 5. The Papal States. In a world where the Spanish Armada crushed Protestant England, the Papal States, centered on Rome, experience a staggering resurgence in power and influence. Pope isn't just a spiritual leader. He's a major political player, his pronouncements carrying immense weight across a re-Catholicized Europe. With Spain as the zealous enforcer of Catholic orthodoxy, worldwide the Vatican's diplomatic and ideological reach is unparalleled since the High Middle Ages. Imagine the Pope in Rome, not just guiding souls, but actively shaping the destinies of kingdoms. His approval sought, his displeasure feared. The defeat of England, a major Protestant stronghold, and the subsequent suppression of the Dutch revolt, now deprived of English aid, means that the Counter-Reformation is overwhelmingly successful. Catholic missionary orders, flush with resources from Spain and the Americas, and emboldened by these victories, fan out across the globe, not just to the New World, but also making inroads into Asia and Africa, often accompanying Spanish and Portuguese traders and soldiers. The Society of Jesus the Jesuits become even more influential, serving as educators, confessors to kings, and advisors in the courts of Catholic monarchs across Europe and beyond. Their intelligence network is second to none. Papal states themselves, the territories in central Italy directly ruled by the Pope, benefit from this renewed prestige. Rome becomes an even more magnificent city, a showcase of triumphant Catholic faith. Vast sums of money flow into its coffers from across the Catholic world, tithes, donations, and Peter's pence. Artists and architects flock to Rome, creating breathtaking Baroque churches, palaces, and fountains, all designed to glorify God and the power of His Church on earth. The Vatican Library and archives swell with documents and treasures, making Rome the intellectual center of Catholic Europe. Militarily, The Papal States themselves don't command vast armies compared to Spain or France. Their power isn't primarily in soldiers, though they maintain a respectable force for defending their own territories and contributing to Catholic leagues. Their true army is the clergy, the missionary orders, and the legions of the faithful. The Pope's ability to excommunicate rulers, to lay interdicts on entire kingdoms, suspending church services, or to rally Catholic powers into alliances is a formidable weapon. He can influence succession crises, mediate disputes between Catholic monarchs, always with an eye to the Church's advantage, and legitimize or delegitimize rulers. The Spanish monarchs, despite their immense power, often defer to the Pope on matters of faith and present themselves as the primary defenders of the Church, a role that further enhances the Pope's status. In this world, the lines between spiritual and temporal power are incredibly blurred. The Index of Forbidden Books is rigorously enforced across Catholic territories, stifling dissenting ideas and scientific inquiries that challenge church doctrine. Universities are heavily influenced by theological considerations. The dream of a unified Christendom under the spiritual guidance of the Pope and the temporal might of the Habsburgs, Spanish and Austrian, seems closer than ever. Pope in Rome is not just a religious figurehead. He is a kingmaker, a power broker, and the ultimate arbiter of legitimacy in a world reshaped by Spanish steel and Catholic faith. His influence permeates every aspect of life in Catholic Europe, making the Papal States, despite their modest geographical size, one of the era's true superpowers. Number 4. The Ottoman Empire. The mighty Ottoman Empire, stretching from the Balkans across North Africa and deep into the Middle East, remains a formidable force, but the Spanish Armada's victory significantly alters its strategic landscape. The Sultan in Constantinople, Istame, now faces a more confident and unified Catholic bloc in Europe, spearheaded by the Spanish Habsburgs and their Austrian cousin. Perennial Christian-Muslim struggle, which has defined Mediterranean and Eastern European politics for centuries, intensifies, but the terms have shifted. With England neutralized and the Dutch revolt likely crushed, Spain is free to devote more resources and attention to its Mediterranean frontier with the Ottomans. This means more Spanish galleys, more fortifications on islands like Malta and Sicily, and potentially more aggressive Spanish policies in North Africa, challenging Ottoman vassals like Algiers and Tunis. The Holy League mentality, which saw a combined Christian fleet defeat the Ottomans at Lepanto in 1571, is reinvigorated. While another Lepanto-scale confrontation might not happen immediately, the pressure is constant. Ottoman expansion into Europe, which had previously reached the gates of Vienna, faces a stiffer, more coordinated resistance from the Habsburgs, who are now less distracted by Protestant threats within the Holy Roman Empire. However, the Ottoman Empire is vast, wealthy, and possesses a powerful military tradition. The Janissaries, the elite Ottoman infantry, are still a highly effective fighting force. The Ottoman bureaucracy, though sometimes plagued by corruption, is sophisticated for its time. Empire controls key trade routes between East and West, particularly for spices and silks that don't pass through Spanish-controlled sea lanes. Cities like Cairo, Damascus, and Aleppo remain major commercial and cultural centers. The Sultan is also the Caliph, the leader of Sunni Islam, giving him immense religious authority over Muslims far beyond his borders. This religious legitimacy is a powerful tool, just as the Pope's is for Catholics. The changed European situation might force the Ottomans to adapt their strategies. They might seek to exploit any remaining rivalries between Catholic powers, perhaps trying to find common ground with France if Paris feels too constrained by Habsburg dominance. Or they might focus more on their eastern frontiers, dealing with rivals like Safavid Persia, or expanding further into Arabia or East Africa. The internal dynamics of the Ottoman court, with its complex succession struggles and influential harem politics, continue to play a significant role in shaping policy. Perhaps the loss of a potential Protestant ally in England and a more aggressively Catholic Europe leads to a period of Ottoman introspection and reform, or conversely, to more aggressive military campaigns to prove their undiminished strength. Culturally, the Ottoman Empire continues its rich artistic and intellectual traditions. Istamad remains a magnificent imperial capital, with grand mosques, palaces, and markets. Ottoman art, calligraphy, poetry, and music flourish. While there's always been some exchange with Europe, the heightened religious and military confrontation might lead to a more guarded approach to Western influences or a selective adoption of Western military technology out of necessity. The empire is certainly not about to crumble. It's a superpower in its own right, with deep reserves of strength. But the Spanish victory in 1588 means it faces a more challenging and potentially more hostile international environment, forcing it to navigate a world where its main European adversaries are stronger and more unified in their opposition. Power is still immense, but the game has become harder. Number 3. The Kingdom of France. France, oh la la. Even with a triumphant Spain next door, France remains a major European power, a kingdom of rich agricultural lands, a large population, and a proud, often prickly sense of its own importance. However, the Spanish Armada's conquest of England fundamentally changes France's strategic position, and mostly not for the better. Imagine being surrounded. The mighty Spanish Empire to the south, controlling Spain itself, and now England to the northwest, and the Spanish allied Holy Roman Empire to the east. It's like being squeezed in a giant Habsburg sandwich. This geographical and political reality shapes everything for France in this new world. French ambitions to be the dominant power in Europe are severely checked. The dream of French kings to expand their influence into Italy or the Low Countries faces a much tougher Spanish Habsburg wall. The French wars of religion, which racked the country in the late 16th century, might have ended differently too. With Spain, the arch defender of Catholicism, so overwhelmingly powerful, French Protestants, Huguenots, would find their position even more precarious. Any French monarch would be under immense pressure from Spain and the Pope to enforce Catholic uniformity with an iron fist. Perhaps the Edict of Nantes, which granted rights to Huguenots in our timeline, would never have happened, or would have been quickly revoked, leading to even greater internal strife or a more complete suppression of Protestantism in France. Economically, France is still a powerhouse. Its agriculture feeds its people and produces wine and other goods for export. French luxury goods, silks, tapestries, fine crafts are still sought after. However, global trade is now utterly dominated by Spain. French attempts to build a colonial empire are severely hampered. With England gone as a naval rival to Spain, the Atlantic is a Spanish lake. Any French efforts to establish colonies in North America or the Caribbean would face overwhelming Spanish opposition. French explorers might still probe, but establishing permanent, thriving colonies, like Quebec or Louisiana as we knew them, becomes incredibly difficult. France might be forced to look for overseas opportunities in areas where Spanish influence is less direct, perhaps, in the Indian Ocean, or focus more on internal development. Militarily, France maintains a large and formidable army. The French nobility has a strong martial tradition. French military thinkers and engineers are among the best in Europe. However, they are constantly preparing for a potential land war against the combined might of the Habsburgs. This defensive posture consumes a vast amount of the state's resources. French diplomacy becomes a delicate balancing act constantly seeking ways to counter Habsburg influence, perhaps by forging alliances with powers further east, like the Ottoman Empire, a traditional if controversial French tactic, or the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, or even trying to sow discord between the Spanish and Austrian branches of the Habsburg family. Culturally, France strives to maintain its own brilliance. The French court, perhaps at a grander palace like Versailles, if it gets built, would still try to be a center of fashion, art, and learning, but with a strong Catholic imprint enforced by Spanish and papal oversight. French language and culture would still be influential, but Spanish might rival it as the dominant language of international diplomacy and high culture backed by imperial might. There's a constant tension between French national pride and the overwhelming shadow of Spanish power. France is like a proud, powerful lion, still dangerous, still regal, but now confined to a smaller cage than it would like, always aware of the even bigger lion next door. Its strength is undeniable, but its freedom of action is significantly curtailed in this Spanish-dominated world. Number 2. The Holy Roman Empire. The Holy Roman Empire, a sprawling collection of territories in Central Europe, mostly under the influence of the Austrian Habsburgs, becomes an even more dominant force on the continent after Spain's victory over England. Think of it as the eastern pillar of a vast Habsburg power block, with Spain as the western and global pillar. The emperor, usually an Austrian Habsburg, finds his authority greatly enhanced, particularly in his efforts to reassert Catholic dominance and centralize power, at least within his family's hereditary lands. The defeat of English Protestantism and the likely crushing of the Dutch revolt are huge boons for the emperor. Protestant princes within the empire, who had previously looked to England and the Netherlands for support, now find themselves isolated and weakened. Counter-Reformation, driven by Jesuit zeal and backed by imperial and Spanish arms, rolls back Protestant gains across Germany and Bohemia. This religious reunification, often achieved through force or coercion, strengthens the emperor's hand against the historically fractious German princes. The 30 Years' War, if it happens in this timeline, would likely be a much shorter, more decisive affair, ending in a clear Catholic imperial victory. This means a more unified, more Catholic, German-speaking heartland of Europe. Militarily, the Holy Roman Empire can call upon substantial forces. The Austrian Habsburgs command their own hereditary lands, Austria, Bohemia, Hungary, which provide soldiers and resources. Additionally, as emperor, they can, in theory, call upon the contingents of the various imperial states, though this is often a complex political process. With fewer internal religious divisions and a powerful Spanish ally, the empire is better able to project power outwards, particularly against the Ottoman Empire on its southeastern frontier. The defense of Vienna and the reconquest of parts of Hungary from the Ottomans become major priorities, and with Spanish support, these efforts are likely to be more successful. Economically, the lands of the Holy Roman Empire are rich in agriculture. Minerals like silver from Bohemian mines and skilled craftsmen. Cities like Prague, Praha, Vienna, Wien, and Augsburg remain important centers of commerce and culture. However, with the Atlantic trade dominated by Spain and the Baltic influenced by other powers, the economic focus might be more continental and Danubian. Trade routes running south to Italy and the Papal States, and east towards Poland, Lithuania, and the Ottoman lands become even more critical. The lack of direct access to overseas colonies, which are all Spanish, means the empire's wealth is primarily generated within Europe. Culturally, the Holy Roman Empire experiences a flourishing of Baroque art and architecture, heavily sponsored by the triumphant Catholic Church and the Habsburg court in Vienna. Music, in particular, thrives, with composers creating elaborate works for church services and courtly entertainment. German language and culture develop under this strong Catholic imperial influence. Intellectual life is shaped by Jesuit universities and strict adherence to Catholic doctrine. While it's a complex patchwork of duchies, kingdoms, prince-bishoprics, and free cities, the overarching trend is towards greater Habsburg influence and Catholic uniformity. The emperor in Vienna, closely allied with his cousin the King of Spain, effectively co-rules continental Europe. It's a vast, populous, and militarily strong entity, second only to its Spanish partner in overall might, forming the bedrock of Catholic Habsburg dominance over the European landmass. Number 1. The Spanish Empire. Behold, the undisputed master of the world, the Spanish Empire. With the English fleet shattered in 1588 and England itself absorbed as a rebellious province, now Nueva Cantabria, perhaps, or Provincia de Inglaterra, Spain's power becomes almost unimaginable by previous standards. King Philip II and his successors in Madrid rule over an empire on which the sun truly never sets, a global colossus stretching from the silver mines of Potosi in the Andes to the Spice Islands of the Philippines, and now including the strategic heartland of Northern Europe. Imagine the sheer scale. All of the Americas, from California, Alta California, down to Tierra del Fuego, is Spanish territory, with French and other colonial attempts being minor, easily contained affairs. The vast wealth of silver and gold from Mexico, Nueva España, and Peru flows uninterrupted into Spanish coffers, funding its immense armies and navies. The Netherlands, without English support, are brought back under Spanish rule, their commercial genius now serving the Spanish crown. The key ports of Antwerp, Ambers, and Amsterdam become Spanish naval bases and trading hubs. England itself is transformed. Spanish becomes the language of administration and commerce. Catholicism is brutally reimposed, with the Inquisition stamping out any remnants of Protestantism. London, Londres, is a provincial capital, its parliament silenced, its resources, wool, tin, and hardy sailors, now exploited for the glory of Spain. English ships are integrated into the Spanish Armada, which now reigns supreme over the Atlantic and much of the world's oceans. Spain's military is invincible. Its tercios, the famed Spanish infantry squares, are the masters of European battlefields. Its navy, augmented by captured English and Dutch ships and shipbuilding capacity, has no rival. Spanish fleets controlled the trade routes, enforce the king's will, and transport troops and treasure across the globe. Fortresses flying the Burgundian Cross of Spain dot coastlines from Havana to Manila, from Ostend to the newly fortified Isle of Wight, Isla de Vecta. Culturally, this is a Spanish golden age, magnified 100-fold. Spanish art, literature, and music define European high culture. The works of Cervantes, Lope de Vega, and Velázquez, or their equivalents in this timeline, are celebrated everywhere. Universities like Salamanca and Alcalá are the premier centers of learning, though all scholarship operates under the watchful eye of the Church and the Crown. The Spanish language becomes the lingua franca of global trade, diplomacy, and intellectual discourse. Cities across Europe and the Americas boast grand plazas, cathedrals in the Spanish Baroque style, and statues of Spanish monarchs and conquistadors. King of Spain is, without exaggeration, the most powerful man on earth. His court at the Escorial is the center of global decision-making. Decrees issued from Madrid reshape continents. While the Austrian Habsburgs manage Central Europe and the Pope guides the spiritual realm, it is the Spanish monarch who holds the ultimate temporal power. He is the paymaster of the Counter-Reformation, the enforcer of Catholic orthodoxy, and the ruler of an empire of unprecedented size and wealth. All other nations on this list, powerful as they may be in their own right, exist in a world defined and dominated by Spanish might. conquest of England wasn't just a victory. It was the act that cemented Spain's place as the unchallengeable global hyperpower, shaping the destiny of the entire planet for centuries to come. The world speaks Spanish, prays Catholic, and trembles before the power of the king in Madrid.